Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're jumping into a really specific moment from Luke's Gospel, chapter
Big.
19.
Right, Jesus arriving in Jerusalem just before Passover.
Exactly. And we're looking at the text itself, Luke 19, verses 28 to 40, but also using some insights from a sermon that really focuses in on one detail.
And that detail is Jesus' reaction when some Pharisees tell him to, well, basically quiet down his disciples.
Yeah. Our mission here is to unpack why that little exchange is actually, pretty significant. There's some real aha moments hiding in there, I think.
Definitely. So Luke paints this picture, right? Jesus is coming towards Jerusalem. He's on a colt.
Fulfilling prophecy, like from Zechariah.
Precisely. And his disciples, they're putting their cloaks on the road. The whole crowd is just erupting in praise.
And Luke gives us the specific words in verse 38. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord.
Peace in heaven and glory in the highest heavens. It's quite the declaration.
It really is. But it's interesting, Luke doesn't actually mention the palm branches.
No, or the word Hosanna either. That's in the other Gospels, not Luke's specific account here.
Okay, so this big celebration is happening. Jesus is being hailed as a king, but then, verse 39, things shift a bit.
Some Pharisees in the crowd speak up.
They say, Teacher, rebuke your disciples. Or, like the NIV puts it, tell them to stop.
Now, the sermon we looked at explores a couple of ways to interpret why they said this.
Right. The sort of traditional view, maybe the one we often default to, is that they were just unhappy.
Unhappy seeing Jesus proclaimed as king, maybe threatened by his popularity, challenging their authority, the standard picture.
Yeah, like in Jesus Christ Superstar or something. It sounds like they just want to shut it down.
It does sound that way on the surface, but the sermon offers a more, let's say, nuanced perspective. It considers the politics of the time.
Oh, okay. What's the nuance there?
Well, the sermon points out how they'd address him, teacher, or rabbi. It's respectful language.
Okay. Not just, hey, you.
Exactly. And apparently the Greek implies a sense of please, like, please tell your disciples to be quiet.
So not necessarily pure antagonism then.
Possibly not. The idea is, remember, it's Passover. Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, he usually marched into Jerusalem with soldiers around this time, a show of Roman power.
Right, to keep things under control during the festival.
Yeah, so the Pharisees, seeing this massive crowd hailing Jesus as king, might have been genuinely worried. Like, this could look like sedition to Pilate.
Inciting rebellion, which could bring down a heavy Roman response on everyone.
Precisely. So maybe it wasn't just, we don't like Jesus, but more like, teacher, please, this is dangerous, tone it down before Pilate cracks down. It's a possibility the sermon raises.
That adds a whole different layer to it, makes them seem, well, maybe more pragmatic, even if perhaps missing the bigger picture.
It certainly complicates the simple bad guys narrative.
Okay, so regardless of their exact motive, whether it's anger or fear or something else, Jesus's reply in verse 40 is just power.
It really is. He says, I tell you, and this is the NIV again, if they keep quiet, the stones will cry out.
Or as the sermon quotes it, slightly different wording, but same idea. If they were silent, even the stones would shout.
Yeah, and the sermon really digs into this. What does that mean, the stones will cry out?
It feels like Jesus is saying this praise, this acknowledgement, it's unstoppable.
That's the core idea the sermon presents. Some truths, some testimonies are just so essential, so fundamental that they have to be expressed.
Like the stories of who Jesus is, what he did, his teachings, the healings, breaking down barriers.
All of it. The sermon argues these things are so vital that if humans were somehow silenced, creation itself, the rocks, the stones would have to bear witness. It's like truth has this inherent power.
Wow. So it's not just about the disciples' enthusiasm. It's about the very nature of the truth they're proclaiming.
Exactly. It must be heard. And the sermon then makes this really neat connection to the Old Testament.
Oh, yeah, with the stones idea.
Psalm 118, verse 22. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone.
The cornerstone psalm. Often linked to Jesus, right?
Yep.
Rejected, but ultimately foundational.
Precisely. It's a psalm of praise, of thanksgiving for deliverance. The sermon links that imagery, the rejected stone becoming vital to Jesus's entry. And this idea that even inanimate stones can have this profound significance. What seems insignificant becomes crucial.
Okay, so the testimony is necessary, even the stones would proclaim it, and it connects to this idea of the rejected becoming the cornerstone.
Yeah.
Where does the sermon take this next?
It moves into a discussion about courage.
Courage. How does that link up?
Well, it distinguishes between two types. First, there's what it calls instinctual courage.
Like reacting bravely in a sudden crisis, jumping into action without thinking.
Yeah, that immediate fight or flight kind of bravery. But then there's faithful courage.
Faithful courage, what's the difference?
Faithful courage is more deliberate. It's about acting with integrity, sticking to your principles, even when you know there could be long-term negative consequences. You see the risk coming, but you act anyway because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, so less about sudden reaction, more about considered conviction despite the cost. Like a whistleblower, maybe.
That's a great example the sermon might allude to, someone who sees the long-term risk but acts on principle. And it uses Winston Churchill's calls for courage during the war as one example.
Right. Facing a known, ongoing threat.
But then it focuses really powerfully on the story of Coventry Cathedral in England,
Oh, the bombed cathedral.
destroyed in World War II. But the sermon highlights how they didn't just clear the rubble and rebuild.
No, they built the new cathedral right next to the ruins, didn't they?
Exactly. Leaving the bombed-out shell standing there as a testament, a witness.
A silent witness, like the stones.
Yeah.
A testimony to the destruction, but also to resilience, to choosing to build again alongside the reminder of the cost.
Beautifully put. It's an ongoing testimony in stone. And this leads to a specific part within the new Coventry Cathedral,
Okay.
a place called the Chapel of Christ in Gethsemane.
Gethsemane. The garden where Jesus prayed before his arrest. The place of pressure.
Right. And the sermon describes this chapel as feeling very different from the main cathedral, not light and airy, but more like a cave, intense, pressurized.
Evoking that feeling of Jesus' agony.
And the focal point is a mosaic called the Angel of Agony.
And the sermon pointed out something really striking about this mosaic.
It did. The angel in the mosaic is holding the cup, symbolizing suffering or destiny.
The cup Jesus prayed might pass from him.
That one. But the angel isn't looking at Jesus. In fact, Jesus isn't even in the mosaic. The angel is looking directly out at the viewer.
At us.
At us, the sermon interprets this as the angel offering that cup, that challenge, that call to faithful courage, not just to Jesus historically, but to each person who enters that space.
Wow. That's confronting.
It is. But the message isn't just about the challenge. It's also that reminder, just as Jesus faced Gethsemane, he is with us when we face ours. We're not alone in those moments that demand courage.
Okay, so the stones cry out, courage is needed, and we're not alone when facing difficult things. How does the sermon wrap this up?
With a very simple, tangible invitation. It suggests taking a stone.
Just a small stone.
Yeah, as a reminder that even stones can declare God's glory, that truth will find a voice, and also, echoing perhaps Romans 8, that nothing can separate us from God's love. It's something physical to hold on to when you're facing your own Gethsemane, your own need for that faithful courage.
So thinking about our deep dive today, it really started with this small interaction of Pharisees telling disciples to be quiet.
Yeah, just a couple of verses.
But it opens up this huge theme. The absolute necessity of bearing witness.
Yeah.
That truth is so powerful. If people won't speak it, the very stones will. That image is just unforgettable.
It really sticks with you, the unstoppable nature of that testimony.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is this. What are the stones in your own life?
The seemingly small things, overlooked things.
Yeah, things that might actually hold deep meaning, or maybe even things calling you to act with that faithful courage we talked about.
Yeah.
What silent testimonies are around you?
And thinking about that mosaic, what cup might be presented to you right now? What challenge, what opportunity, what call to integrity?
What does it ask you to do or
Right.
to be? It's worth reflecting on the different shapes that faithful courage can take in our own lives. Thanks for exploring this with us.